The mist lay thick that morning, curling like woven lace between the crooked stones of the basin ruins. Light filtered through in silvery shafts, but it didn't pierce far. It never did here. The fog was not just weather. It was history, stitched into the land's breath. Storm sat beneath the arch of a broken shrine wall, legs folded neatly beneath him. He was older now, his limbs longer, features more defined. Not quite grown, but no longer small. His fur was still pale and dusted with spectral softness, and his violet eyes had deepened further, like dusk caught in glass. He was tracing a pattern in the dirt with a small, flattened stick, spirals and lines and loops that meant nothing. Or maybe something only he understood. Trapeze hovered nearby, watching in her usual stillness. Her zippers were half closed, one stitched hand resting idly against the tattered hem of her side. The shepherd bobbed beside her, slow and quiet. "You've been drawing that same shape for days," she said softly, voice no louder than the shifting fog. "What does it mean?" Storm didn't look up right away. His voice came quiet, dry at the edges. "I am not sure yet." A pause. "Sometimes I think I'm remembering it, not creating it." Trapeze tilted her head. She liked that answer. She floated closer and sat beside him, her legs folding beneath her like mist over stone. Her form barely shifted the ground, but Storm shifted anyway, leaning just slightly against her, the way he always had. They sat in silence for a while. The wind moved, slow and low, like a breath no one had released. Then, Trapeze spoke again, carefully this time. "Have you been thinking about it?" Storm blinked. "About..." She didn't clarify right away. Let him feel the weight of the question, see if it took root. He watched the mist for a moment longer, then murmured, "My evolution?" "Yes." He didn't answer at first, just set down the stick, as if it no longer belonged in his paw. "I've seen others," he said after a long while, "become things." Pause. Bigger, louder, brighter. His voice didn't hold jealousy, just observation, detached, thoughtful, like it always was. Trapeze didn't speak. She waited. "I don't want to be louder," he added. "Or warmer. Or something that chases light." She gave a slow nod. "You don't have to be." Storm curled his tail inward. "Some days I feel close to it, like I'm teetering on a place where I could become. But I don't move. I just listen." Trapeze's head lowered slightly. "That's not wrong. Listening is its own kind of becoming." He finally turned to look at her. "Did you ever want me to be one thing?" "No," she said, instantly. "Never one." Storm's ears twitched. He turned away again, eyes tracking the fog like it might answer something first. "I think I'm drawn to the ones who flicker," he whispered. "To things that pass through instead of staying." "Ghosts," Trapeze murmured. "Yes," Storm replied. "And no. I mean, yes, but not just them." He looked up at her, something strange in his eyes. Not fear, but death. Something he couldn't quite say. "I think I'm already changing," he admitted, just slowly. Quietly. Trapeze reached out, brushing her hand over his ruff, smoothing a pale strand of fur that always curled upward when the air was damp. "You're a child of fog," she said softly. "You don't bloom, you gather." He closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. "Will I fade like one?" he asked. The question half-formed, fragile. "No," she whispered. "You'll become like mist on stone. You'll linger. You'll stay in the cracks." Storm pressed his cheek into her cloth-wrapped arm. "Do I have to choose?" "Eventually," she said. "But not because the world demands it. Because one day you will." He breathed slowly. The shepherd curled beside him, resting like a thread wound into place. "I don't know what I'll become," he murmured, "but I don't think I'll become something that leaves." Trapeze's zipper mouth creaked open just enough for her voice to deepen. "You already became mine." Storm didn't smile much, even at 5, but this time he did. A soft one. A private one. Meant only for her. Do you think my sisters have evolved? I think they've become more than they were, she replied. But maybe not yet what they'll be. Do you think they'd wait for me? Trapeze was quiet for a long time. Then, if they're anything like you, they already are. The fog that morning was thick as wool, barely moving, as though the entire basin were holding its breath again. Storm stepped lightly through the dead forest, weaving between brittle trunks and thorn-rooted tangles. The earth here didn't make sound. Not even underfoot, it simply yielded, soft and forgotten. He hadn't meant to return to the mossy rock. But his pause had brought him, drawn again by that old weight, that strange pull, not like fire drawing moths, more like silence drawing thought. The great green stone stood ahead, half buried and slick with dew. Even in the decay of the forest, moss flourished there, vivid and bright, alive in a place that shouldn't be. Storm paused a few feet from its edge, ears tilted low, eyes half-lidded in thought. Then he heard it, a high, broken gasp, like wind caught in a net. He turned. There, at the base of a hollowed-out trunk, a small drifloon shivered, one of the familiar ones from the nearby gatherings, soft blue sheen, string arms curled tight against his body. Storm's brow furrowed. Why are you here again? The drifloon didn't answer. It couldn't. Not with the way it was trembling. Not with the way it was cornered. Storm followed its gaze and saw the shadow. A haunter. Larger than most. Hunched unnaturally. Its grin twisted, flickering in and out of focus like a flame devouring itself. Its eyes burned white. Storm stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between it and the drifloon. The haunter's leer curled wider. You shouldn't interfere, little Echo. Storm's tail curled tight behind him. You shouldn't be hurting them. The haunter laughed, a wheezing, stuttered sound that sounded like water through bones. They wandered too far. That makes them mine. Storm's breath came steady. No. The haunter darted forward, all claws and glare. Storm vanished using Shadow Sneak. He reappeared above the ghost, twisting midair, his fur catching the dim green of the mossy rock below. A shadow ball formed between his jaws and launched, striking the haunter across the face before it could react. It snarled, spinning wildly, swiping through mist and nothing. Storm landed softly, crouched between tree roots, his eyes flickering with violet light. The haunter roared, flinging a burst of spectral energy that shattered bark and snapped through the gloom. Storm blurred again, dodging just in time, reappearing behind the ghost. This time he didn't hesitate. Another shadow ball, point blank. It struck home. The haunter shrieked, spiraling backward, twisting in on itself, its flickering form growing unstable. The fog recoiled. The drifloon huddled low. And then, the haunter fled. Fled not from power, but from presence. Storm did not follow. He turned back to the drifloon, who hovered shakily in place, eyes wide. Storm said nothing, just gave a small nod, a flick of his ears, a gesture that said, "You're safe now." The drifloon lingered a moment, then rose slowly into the fog and disappeared between the skeletal trees. Storm stood still for a breath, then two. Then something shifted behind him. The rock. The mossy rock pulsed. A deep, slow heartbeat of light, green and gold, laced with silver dew. The moss shimmered. The air buzzed low, a vibration more felt than heard. Storm turned to face it. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. The light reached out. A warmth, not like fire, not burning, more like damp leaves, sun-dappled and quiet, like being held by the forest itself. The glow wrapped around him. Storm blinked. His fur caught the light, and for a moment, the mist looked like water suspended around him. And then, he changed. Not in a flash, not in a burst, but slowly, naturally. The way leaves unfurl. His form lengthened, the tufts of fur around his neck deepened into a rich, soft green, still ruffled, still ghost-touched, but living now. The pale hues of his coat became dusted with mossy cream and gray-brown, not golden like others, not leaf-drenched. fog-drenched. His ears didn't rise the way Leafeon ears were known to. They folded back, soft and low, like wet fabric, hugging close to his head as if listening to the world instead of reaching above it. And from beside each ear, curled inward, like a ribbon of green thought, grew 2 leaves, one on each side, arched and gentle. Not a crown, not a crest. The light dimmed slowly. The rock pulsed one final time and stilled. Storm stood still, breathing slow. His eyes still the same color, but deeper, like fog made from twilight, not dawn. He looked at his paws, then up at the trees, then behind him. He did not smile, but he exhaled, like something that had been waiting inside him for years had finally been allowed to unfold. He was not glowing anymore, but he was growing. The basin fell silent again, and in that hush, the fog curled gently around the newly born Leafeon's legs, not to hide him, but to follow. The basin didn't speak of change, not aloud. It didn't call out when something shifted beneath its trees. It didn't shout when evolution occurred, but it knew, and it remembered. The fog was gentle now. It clung low to the roots and glided along the water's edge, parting softly as Storm walked home. His new paws made no more noise than his old ones had, but the moss beneath them recognized the weight, the way he moved, measured, like he was trying not to wake the world. His new form still settled into itself, like the air around him was relearning how to fit. The leaves beside his ears curled slightly in the wind, not with nervousness, with thought. His ruff, the ghost of a mane, was still slightly damp, the green of it muted, like lichen beneath twilight. He didn't rush, he never did. The den was where it had always been, stitched into the roots of the gnarled willow, hidden behind hanging moss and fog-draped silence. Storm stepped into the entrance. Inside, the light was soft, lantern moss glowing pale and green across the earthen walls. Trapeze sat near the far edge, cross-legged, one stitched claw threading a long line of faded silk through an old puppet's shoulder. She didn't look up right away. Her gaze was deep in her work, her motions patient. But the moment Storm stepped fully into the den, she paused. Thread caught mid-pole. Her head lifted, slowly. She looked up. Her single gleaming eye locked with him, and she was still. Not frozen, but stilled, like fabric made breathless. Storm stood there, not shifting, just being, the way he always did. Trapeze's eyes traced every detail, his quiet new height, the pale curl of leaves beside his ears, the deepened violet of his gaze, the way his fur caught the lantern light in a different way now, softer, folded, half in this world, half still nestled in the mist, and that ruff of green, still ghost-touched despite the evolution, still his. Storm finally spoke, quiet, gentle. I didn't mean to. Trapeze rose slowly. Her movement was weightless but deliberate, like fog deciding where to fall. You didn't force it, she murmured, voice like worn velvet. That's different. He looked down at his paws, one ear flicking low. It felt like remembering something I hadn't lived yet. Trapeze stepped closer. She didn't touch him at first, just hovered near, eyes searching, not for damage, but for meaning. The rock called, she said, not a question. Storm nodded once. There was a Drifloon, hurt, a haunter. I chased it off. And the basin washed, she added softly. Storm looked up at her. Did it choose me? Trapeze tilted her head. No. He blinked. It recognized you, she said. That's rarer. Silence settled between them, soft as dusk. Then she reached forward, claw brushing gently along his neck ruff, tracing where fur had become green, where life had pressed itself into him without erasing what was already there. This didn't take the ghost from you, she whispered. It grew around it, like ivy finds stone. Storm's breath hitched. I thought I'd feel brighter, louder. I thought I'd glow. You do, Trapeze murmured. But it's not light. It's pull. She moved around him slowly, examining every angle, not like a scout, like a tailor with a needle made of care. These leaves, they lay back, like your ears. Storm dipped his head, self-conscious. They're not like others. Exactly, she said. They're yours. He looked up again. For a long moment, Trapeze said nothing more. Then, quietly, voice thick with something unspoken. I'm proud of you. Storm blinked hard, not because he hadn't heard those words before, but because they always meant more from her, from someone who spoke so little, from someone stitched together by loss and silence. He leaned forward, and for the first time in his new form he tucked his head into her side, into the loose thread-wrapped fold of her body where her chest met her arm. Trapeze lowered her claw and held him there. You didn't become something else, she said softly, nearly into his ear. You became more of you. The lantern moss dimmed slightly as the fog outside thickened once more. Protective, reverent, listening. And in that moment, wrapped in thread and earth and stillness, Storm's leaf-veiled ears twitched once, then settled. And for the first time, he slept deeply. Not because he was tired, but because he felt known. The basin had grown quieter since Storm's evolution, not because it feared him, or even because it didn't understand him, but because it respected him. The fog no longer drifted across his path without noticing. It parted now, gently, reverently, as though it knew his paws carried something that could reach beyond mist and memory. He still spent his days the same way, wandering through the old stones, visiting the edge of moss-ringed pools, laying beneath the willow roots with his head half buried in the cool moss. But something was different. He lingered more, watched more stars through the mist holes in the canopy, tilted his head at the birds that passed overhead, sat for longer than usual at the ridges that overlooked the distant lands beyond the basin. Trapeze noticed. She always did. She never said anything at first, not when he stayed out past dusk, not when he returned from deeper in the woods with petals caught in his ruff, not when she caught him once, paw pressed lightly to the old map they stitched to the inside wall of their den. But tonight, the moment had ripened. The fog outside was unusually still. No wind, no song, not even a rustle in the trees. Inside the den, Storm lay curled near the lantern moss. He wasn't asleep. He rarely slept much anymore. He was watching the fireflies that drifted just outside the root hollow window, their dim gold barely breaking through the haze. Trapeze sat across from him, mending again, a long tear in the old puppet she'd never finished. She spoke softly, as always. Have you been thinking about leaving? Storm didn't look at her at first, just blinked, ears lowering slightly. Not with guilt, just awareness. A little, he admitted. Trapeze nodded slowly, her needle pausing mid-stitch. It's not a crime, you know, she murmured, to want more than this. Storm turned to face her. I don't want to leave you. Her stitched mouth curved gently, not quite a smile, but something like a sigh made into expression. Wanting to leave here isn't the same as leaving me. He sat up a little, his leafy ruff stirring the motion. I feel something, like something's missing. Trapeze leaned forward, setting the puppet aside. Sometimes that's curiosity, she said. Sometimes it's memory reaching forward instead of back. Storm tilted his head. You mean my sisters? Maybe, she said. Maybe it's them. Maybe it's the world outside these stones. The sun beyond the fog. The names of flowers that don't grow here. Storm's eyes softened. Have you always known I'd leave? I've always known, she said gently, that you'd have to choose. He was quiet for a long time. Then, would it hurt you? Trapeze let out the softest sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. Yes, she admitted, but not the way you think. She stood, her shadow falling softly over him as she crossed the space between them. It would hurt more if I kept you from becoming what you're meant to be, just so I could keep you close. Storm looked down, one paw dragging lightly across the dirt floor. Would I be allowed to come back? She knelt, lowering herself to his level, her good eye catching the glow of the lantern moss. You are always allowed to return. Storm looked up at her now, really looked. Trapeze reached forward and brushed one claw gently over his cheek. You are not something I own. You are something I was blessed to hold, for as long as you needed me. And if I still need you, he whispered. Then I'll be here, she said, no matter how far you go. They sat like that for a while, mist curling through the den's entrance, brushing softly against the edges of the moment, and never breaking it. Then Trapeze added, voice low, if you want to find them, your sisters, you can. If you want to see the world instead, that's fine too. You owe your past nothing, not even your name. Storm swallowed. The leaves behind his ears twitched like they were listening to something far off. I think I want both, he said. To see the world, and to find them. Trapeze exhaled a sound of quiet pride. Then you're already on your way. Storm pressed his head lightly against her chest. She wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. The fog outside drifted lower, watching, holding the space around them like it knew something sacred was changing. When Storm finally pulled back, his voice was steady. I'll stay a little longer, until I'm ready. Trapeze nodded. Take your time. The world waits. And the next day, when Storm wandered the edge of the basin once more, he did so not with hesitation, but with purpose. Because now he was not drifting, he was preparing.